Hello, my name is Nick Harris. I am a children's book illustrator and I have been full-time freelance for about 30 years. Today we're going to be painting a semi-submerged figure in ArtRage 3.55 I'm using at the moment, Studio Pro. I'll be pointing out little tips like that. You can use H to flip the canvas as you go along. I'll try and remember to point things out like that, as I said, as we go. I'm working on a Windows desktop with a Wacom Intuos 3 A5, just so you know. Blocking in the colours, as it said before, with the oil brush, which is nice and smeary. You can adjust various settings like thinners. Another pointer there, you can zoom in and out using the spacebar and shift, or there's a little puck in the corner. And to make all the palettes disappear, I am right clicking, which I could do on a Windows machine. If you're on a Mac, just press enter, everything will disappear. You can toggle that. My idea kind of behind this is I was thinking of John Everett. In the back of my mind is the painting of Ophelia by John Everett Millais. Pre-Raphaelite. It was painted in about 1851, 1852, according to Wikipedia, so that may be wrong, but I've checked and other places, and that seems to be accurate. Remember, pointing out again, you can hold even H to flip. Meanwhile, back at Ophelia and John Everett Millais, I tend to work out of my head. If you really want to see how to paint a semi-submerged figure, go and look at his painting, which is in the Tate. He went down to the riverbank, studied all the flora, and exquisitely painted that, and then went back to his studio and chucked a poor girl called Elizabeth Siddal in a bath of water. I remember we're talking in Victorian times, before, not necessarily with fantastic plumbing and heating, and he put some candles under the bath which regularly went out. She caught a terrible chill and he was nearly sued for it. Now, I suggested to my wife that I could go down and chuck her in the canal in a frock and take pictures of her, but she wasn't for that, so I'm doing what I usually do, as I said, working out of my head. And as you can see, ran into trouble quite early on, in as much as I gave this poor girl a very short neck. It looked like she'd run into a wall. So I've copied and pasted, which takes it to another layer, and then I've adjusted it up slightly. Excuse me. Looks a little bit more natural now. Now, I don't normally paint women this lumpy, but the idea again is she is in the water, and wearing a frock like that, when you jump in the water, not that I've tried it myself, but your clothes sort of puff up. They trap the air, it's trapped in it. Acts like buoyancy aids. I don't know if any of you have ever done the thing where you take a pair of pyjamas, tie knots in the bottom, throw in the pool. You do it as a kid, as a survival technique. In case you're ever in that situation of being in your pyjamas when you get in the water. Well, it might prove handy. This girl's not in her pyjamas, she's in a frock. And as you can see, I've tried to adjust her head yet again a bit more, and I'm actually drawing back into it some more, because she was looking a bit odd. I'm not saying by the time I finish she will look any less odd, but she'll look differently odd. Trying to get her neck right, trying to get her chest not to look quite so strange. It's generally drawing and painting as I go along. And the painting, as it says there, is with the oil brush and palette knife. It's very good for when you want things softened. You can add smears of colour like that quite brightly, and then soften them in with the palette knife, as you would with real oil paint, or could with real oil paint if you wanted to. And if you want to glaze, you can thin the paint down. If you want to have it like it's a clean glaze over dried oil paint, just put it on another layer and set it to multiply. Or not, if you don't want it to darken that much. Trying to render up the form a bit more here. make it make a bit more sense. It's never going to look photographic with me working out of my head as I am, but you can sort of just use logic to make it look reasonably solid. Light source, I've decided, is coming from in front of you, above you, looking down about 60 degrees. That's why it's glinting off her cheek there, and probably her forehead. Cursor seems to have stopped. I must have stopped for a big slurp of coffee here. It's actually stopped for a very long time, hasn't it? Must have been several mugs of coffee. No, I was thinking about how to make this composition work better. You can edit and crop the canvas. In this case, I've added it, and I remember I'm doing this as a voice narration after the fact. So I also remember I do make it bigger again because I want her to look more like she's floating in a bigger pool of water than that. As I said, the point of this particular exercise is it's for the Q&A for Imagine Effects, and the question was about how do you paint a figure semi-submerged in water. It was wittily phrased, the question, but I would suggest you go to the magazine to find out how it was phrased. Made me laugh anyway. But I answer in the magazine about a lot depends on the water surface. I have chosen a fairly placid pond, stroke pool, whatever you want to call it here. If she was in a raging sea, obviously it'd be a totally different kettle of fish. There'd be froth, there'd be all sorts of surface effects, the texture to the water. This is a totally different surface. And the light will react with it very differently. And also, of course, as well as the surface of the water, the light at the time will have a big effect. Is it sunny? Is it grey? Is it foggy? I've picked a fairly bright day. You're looking down, so you can see through the surface of the water. Where you're close to it, further away, you would get more reflection off because you're looking more obliquely at the water further away. And I've picked the implication is it is a deepish pool, hence the deep colour. And so to make her stand out, I've picked a yellow dress to sort of be almost complementary colour to it. And I'm working on a layer behind her and trying to give a loose sort of gradient, nothing too pristine. I don't want to use any sort of actual gradient maker. I'm just using paintbrush strokes and then softening them with the palette knife as I was in the blocking in. That is the water surface. The behind where the reeds, foliage, whatever it is, I'm placing there on a layer above. Now to pick her out, I will have, as I said, you're looking more obliquely at the water behind, so I'm making that lighter, so you're seeing more of the reflection from the sky there above the grass. At the top of the grass, the actual grass you can't see because that would be distracting. This way, that lighter colour comes below the top of the canvas, so it doesn't take your eye off it. Where you're supposedly will be looking, which is probably her face first. We tend to look at faces in compositions. It's a human thing. I don't know if animals do it when they look at animal pictures. You have to ask them. When appropriate and whenever you can, do merge layers down, particularly when you're working with things like the oil paint brushes. As I said, this is in ArtRage, but in other oily painting emulation things as well. I would suggest it because in the real world you'll be working on a canvas and you get more of a feel of what it's like to work with oils if you can keep it to as few layers as possible. That said, I've kept her on a layer above the water, and that's just me trying to smooth things out. You'll see a lot of this kind of fettling going on, then me changing my mind. I probably should have left it round about here, because it more or less almost works here. As you see, I go on and ruin it completely. It's one of my best tricks. Really, you need a bit of lift music now, don't you? Because I'm just kind of watching what I'm doing, trying to remember. This was just sort of boring tidying, really. You're just getting to see the whole process. How exciting for you. Except I don't quite show you the end bit, because that was just extremely tedious. You would just be you'd be asleep by then anyway, if you're not already. And I'm trying to imagine how her dress, certain parts of it would be sort of caught at the water surface, and the other bits below the surface, where I've decided the water isn't beautifully clear. There is there's a sort of sediment element to it, so it's not pristine and crystal clear. So the stuff below the surface is clearly duller than the bright yellow of the dress, to make it stand out, to make the edges stand out more. Yes, I do believe I'm adding bits more paint here to be softened. And because I've done it on a separate layer, I can then cut bits away. If I want hard edges round the side against the water, I can do that. Now, before long, I haven't really tackled reflections much here, apart from the reflection of the reeds at the top, which, as you can see, is a darker tone than the reeds above it, the actual reeds above it, just to differentiate the water's edge. It's fairly crudely done, but it sort of more or less works in a way already. So bear that in mind before you get very, very detailed. Try to sort of keep that going, if that's the effect you want. Adding a few highlighty bits here to try and give it some sort of form. That's supposed to be whether it just cuts into the water and goes below it, because there will be a certain shadow of the water below on the fabric. That was just me sniffing. Do you get commentary for everything? Because I'm making it up, I'm sort of playing with shapes and trying to see what works and what doesn't. Yeah, I really should have left it around now. It just about works now. I quite like it at this stage. Quick, stop your fool, stop your fool. No, he won't. He's going to carry on. He's an idiot. Now, I would highly recommend getting decent reference for doing things like this. I tend to wing it just because I'm a Burke. And it's because of the way I've always worked. I'm a long-time Burke. As you see, I'm trying to indicate folds under the water surface. But it doesn't. It kind of half works. For the creases at the back, but I lose all these. I think later on, I decide I don't want them. Softening things with that was me softening things with the palette knife. Now, for me, this is a comparatively small number of layers. It would normally be way off the page, and I would be completely messed up by now because I would only have labelled a few of them. See, lots of bad habits I've got. Try and develop as few bad habits as you can. Develop good ones. They'd make you much more efficient. overall the painting took about, I don't know, 6.5 hours, something like that, which is fairly swift for me. But then it's the sort of painting that you could do quite quickly because there's nothing needing huge amounts of detail. I mean, water surfaces, just kind of tones and colours and intermediate shapes. Like I said, I'm sort of trying to lose those creases now. I wasn't particularly happy with them. Looking at it now, I think as I said, I should have probably left it. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Should be fitted with a rear view mirror. The actual depth of the water is built up over several tones. The one you can see second from bottom in the layer stack is set to multiply at a sort of darky browny overtone, and that's what has given it the more depth. If it was just pure blue, yeah, it wouldn't look quite right. I'm thinking, so I'm in the UK, and our ponds tend to be more sort of brackish, because of all the dead leaves and that you get in them. I'm making them sound very appealing, aren't I? They're beautiful. See, lots of fiddly stuff going on here. I do love fiddly stuff. Still haven't really tackled reflections though. We will get there, honestly. It is one of the key things we will be talking about, I suppose. If you're talking about water, you can't really not talk about reflections. Particularly when you're talking about a half-submerged figure. Because we'll be able to use them to differentiate between what's above water and what's below water, if it's not that clear. Because the angle I've picked, you're kind of looking down like this. It's not necessarily leaping out at you which is above and which is below. Perhaps I should have picked a choppy sea. See, that would have been easier to show, because you wouldn't really have seen a lot of what was below the surface at all, the way I would have tackled it. Perhaps I should rewind and do that now. Now, I don't know if you can see it highlighted, but I'm actually working on her layer at the moment. So this painting is above the painting of the water. Still trying to decide quite what her frock is doing around the hem. A sensible person would have reference at this point. No one's ever accused me of being sensible. I see that yellow stands out a bit better from the blue and makes it look more like it's on the surface. That's what I should be doing. Do I do that? I can't remember. Like to add a bit of tension. See, that seems to be working a bit better now. The same will apply to the flesh tones as well, of course. Below the surface, if you make them a little bit darker and give them a hard edge where it goes into the water. Now, I'm not accounting at all for refraction here. You know, if you put a stick in the water and look down at it, and you can see into the water, that is, it looks like it's bent because the light travels at a different speed in the water to it does through air, getting to your eye, and so it looks like it's bent. I'm not really coping with even tackling that. If maybe I was doing it from a different angle, I would do that more. I'm kind of avoiding that bit, like we've got enough to deal with as it is, with reflections and tones below the surface. But by all means, you bring it into yours. Now, if you're wondering about the colours I've chosen for this particular image I'm painting, they were kind of selected by my own particular taste at random, really. But then I like to use a fairly limited palette if I can to give the whole image some sort of unity. If you use too many colours, it can get very out of hand. It's hard to control. So if you keep referring to a few base colours and work from them, it helps control things a bit. If you really want to get a handle on controlling colour, look at some of Simon Dominic Brewer's examples. He's great with ArtRage. He's better known to use Painter, but he's got some great ideas on how to control colour. I wish I had his organisation. But you can add them to samples, in case I didn't mention that. As you go along, just click the Add Local Sample button and they're added there. As you can see, I'm just fiddling away as I go. I've added a couple of highlights where the water is glinting around the edges. That's what I'm doing just now. Trying to define where the water cuts the form. I don't mean it actually cuts it, but you understand where the body is cutting the plane of the water, because that's what we're really working with, a shape cutting into a flat plane. If you've got 3D software, that would be a good thing to check on this sort of thing. Picking at highlights at the moment, just trying to help define some shapes. Try and give it a bit of form and a bit of light. Excuse me. You may notice the hair behind. I've tried to have it sort of floating in the water. I might have some of that disappearing into the water a bit later below the surface, so the tone of that may change. Fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. Still trying to define the shapes of the bits poking out of the water. And trying to soften them a bit. As I've stated, and as you must have realised if you didn't notice me stating it, I do tend to make this up as I go along. So you'll often notice that I make things up and then I rub them out because I don't think they look right. Quite a lot of trial and error goes on here. Now, this isn't a correct way to work, it isn't an incorrect way to work, it's just a working method that I have developed. You have to work with what best methods work for you, your particular way of thinking, and just the habits that you've developed. You can develop good habits and bad habits. I think most of my habits are quite bad. We won't go into too many of them. I'm starting to work on just developing some shapes that I can possibly use to make some nice reflections in a minute. Also trying to lighten up the tone here a bit so that it picks the girl out more, the girl's head in any case. Painting it, then blurring it, painting it, then blurring it. And do also bear in mind that reflections, are, depending on the angle you're looking at them, of course, very seldom are exact reversals of the thing they're reflecting. Because, like, say you're looking at the reflection of a table, you're looking down at the surface of the table, the reflection will be the underside of the table. So you're not seeing the same thing. Perspective comes into reflections as well. Consider that when you're trying to sort them out. Not that the ones we're doing here are going to be too difficult to technical to work out perspective-wise, because there's no regular shapes to play with too much. The perspective still applies, obviously, but it's more forgiving when the shapes are less regular, or can be. You can see just starting to build it up. Tones are still darker than the original reeds and grass. Putting odd little details here to try and give it a sense of place. I'm thinking sort of a reed bank, that kind of thing. Do odd bits of blending. I'm doing a little bit of blurring here. I'm trying one of the blenders, as you can see. 1 second from the right. But it kind of drags the paint out. You'll also notice that it's making some strange, well, you might consider them strange colours. It's using real colour mode, real colour blending, which is a setting you can have in the options of ArtRage. And it means that sort of blues and yellows do, if you use palette knifing on them, give you sort of green, quite nice greens, and that quite often in some software you don't get nice colours from that. I was trying to sample a colour and I touched the background. You can change the background colour, not the canvas, I mean, of the actual workspace, by on a PC you press Alt and pick the colour that you want it to go to. I mean, I'm quite happy with it as it is a kind of slightly off-white for the yellow colour. It's quite kind on the eye. See, I've done it again. Now that happens because I'm using a precise cursor and I can't always see exactly where it is. And so sometimes I stray off the canvas onto the workspace when I'm trying to sample colour. I'm not meaning to do it. Just keep you entertained. Adding a few sort of leafy shapes to the reeds. Reflections are still a bit boring. It's not really there, is it? Let's kind of get some sort of tonal areas into there first. See, I'm not trying to match the reflection exactly to what it's reflecting, and immediately softening it. Not exactly methodical, just kind of sort of going by, picking and choosing where I think I'll have a go. I'm not just working methodically left to right or right to left or up to down. Of course, if you've got something nice to reflect, it makes reflections easier to do. So just adding some marks that could possibly be mistaken for reflections. It's all a bit blobby and sort of clinical at the moment. immediately you soften them, it starts to look a little bit like a different surface. Did the background colour again. Just in case you missed it the first 2 times. Don't want you to feel you've missed anything. It works a bit better if you've got a slightly cleaner edge like that, more defined edge. Adding some more shapes down there. These aren't sort of what the reflection, making them a bit wiggly, but there's an easier way to do this. I'll show you in a minute. That's sort of just painting it by hand like that. It's something you can do more in the real world with a real palette knife and real oil paints. Let's see, just going around her head, highlighting a bit by making it lighter behind her, so it throws the darker shape of the darker outline of her head forward. This isn't the easier way yet. I'm still just painting. You see, if the water was completely flat, then this would be kind of, I suppose, okay. But it would be an absolute milk pond, wouldn't it? It would be like no wind at all, no ripples. It's a bit dead, unless it's supposed to be sort of magically dead, sort of enchanted. I suppose that might be an excuse for it. But we're not doing an enchanted duck pond at the moment. Now adding some bigger areas of tone. Oh yes, that beefs it up a bit more. Gives it a bit more. Yeah, it just gives it more form, doesn't it? Some bigger, softer areas over the actual object and the reflections. Just darkening some of the tones a bit. Try and throw things forward a bit more. Give it a bit more punch. It's all fettling and adjusting the whole thing as you go. I'm softening some things here. The dancing cursor there. It is quite a bit faster than I actually work, obviously. If only I could work this fast. God, churn out a book a week. I think we've gone into coffee mode again. Oh, that pops up now and again. That's very annoying on Windows, so I have to go and do something about that. Just about the general colour thing. Oh, let's pop in here. Right. Soft palette knife for ripple effects. This was what I was talking about. This is me using the, it's highlighted there, this soft palette knife, which is the middle of the 5, and just dragging it left and right, left and right, left and right. And those straight reflections suddenly take on a much more ripply, fluid look. And it's so much easier than just trying to paint that without with the oil paintbrush. See, that's got more of a feeling of, to me, that's got more of a feeling of water to it. Like using a real knife, it's not an exact science, so you have to sort of play with it a bit. But then you can always go back in and touch things in afterwards with the oil paint. set to insta dry. If you set it to insta dry, then it doesn't blend with the paint below it, the same as if you don't set it to insta dry, and you can get better coverage, particularly if you turn the thinness down a bit as well. See, this is me going over some of the bits around her and using that same palette knife blender, and it's got more of a feeling of movement to it. Now I'm merging the layers down, which is available on every layer. You can merge them down individually, or if you go to the canvas layer, you can merge all the layers in one go when you're ready to do that. Little menu, drop down menus from the bottom right hand corner of each layer marker. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. Now I'm pulled back like this at the moment because it gets a better feeling of what's going on overall. I'm very good at getting in too close and losing sight of the whole. Now I zoomed out using spacebar and shift, and then spacebar actually you can drag the canvas around, same as in a lot of softwares. That's me zoomed in again using the same thing. I don't tend to use the puck that I highlighted at the very start of the video. I don't think I mentioned it, but I highlighted it. It's I don't know, I'm just not in the habit of it because I've got my Wacom with its buttons on it. I find it just as easy to stick two fingers at the top. I'm right-handed. My left hand is hovering over the keys to do these kind of navigational transformations. Hopefully you can see the ripples behind. I mean, they're quite painterly, but they work reasonably well. This is in body colour, obviously. Oil painted it, using it heavily like this, opaque like this, is called body colour. Tidying bits here and there. Hope it's not ticklish. If ever you've used ArtRage before, you will know that the palettes, apart from the little pods, the little square pods, are all transformable. You might wonder why the tools are up in the top right hand corner. That's because that's where I choose to have them. Because I'm right-handed, I'd prefer them up there than in the bottom left-hand corner, which is the default position for them. When you first open up ArtRage, boot up ArtRage, it'll appear you'll find the tools are in the bottom left-hand corner, but you can transform their size and drag it up to the top right, or well, wherever you want really. And I rotated it round, so it took a little bit of getting used to the tools being in a different order. But not having to move my hand across the canvas to the left side, I find that helps me. I just move straight up. Yeah, I'm going to have to do something with that arm later. The angle looks a bit funny. I might not do it actually within the video, but hopefully I'll sort that before I actually send the picture off to IFX Mag. My word, what bright green eyes. Yeah, she's just an old looking girl. If anyone actually looks like that up there. No, you're not very old, you're beautiful. It's very easy to get drawn in playing with painting faces. This isn't really about painting faces, this is about figures in general. In the water. I only picked a girl on this particular occasion so we could have like the big puffy sleeves, and you do get men with puffy sleeves I suppose, but it seemed more obvious to me. As I said, I was thinking of the John Everett Millais painting. Not that this is anything like that, and not that I'm anything like him. He was fantastic. Tidying bits here and there as I go. Put a glint in the bottom of that eyelet, as that would be reflected light coming off her sort of yellow dress, really. And also the water, you could have reflection effects off the water as well, if you feel like going down that path. Yes, that was another cough, sorry. I had a biscuit a while ago and there's a crumb caught in the back of my throat. It was a very nice biscuit there. Worth the crumb. I hope you also notice that I've used a canvas texture on this, so you're always going to be fighting that slightly, because I wanted it to look a little bit more like a real media painting. That's just my bag at the moment. It's the kind of thing I'm doing. I used to be very much no texture, or maybe a slight watercolor texture, and using watercolor sort of technique. Yeah, there's that silly message again. Got rid of it that time. Nothing to do with the painting, just to do with my system. So don't worry about that. Softening that reflection, it's a bit of a funny colour, but break it up a bit. Actually painting in some slightly different shapes using the pencil. I mean, the great thing about digital is you can mix all these media together. And sometimes I find the pencil, just for the finer tuning things, you can get away with using the pencil and it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb against the oil paint. That's partly helped by the fact that, as I said, I've set up a canvas texture at the base of this. Which again helps with giving you a sort of unity to the marks, because the texture shows through a bit. See, I've tried to add subtlety into the board, what would be flat boring dark at the bottom, so that it kind of intimates maybe there's other stuff going on under the surface, as well as her shapes of the hint of sort of darker yellow shapes of her dress somewhere below the surface. There's also other things going on further down in the water that make some parts even darker. I will have to go in and give a bit of more sort of general surface ripples down there as well, though I think they're still a bit bland. As you see, I said about darkening that hair. I've tried to have it going into the water a bit, so it's not quite so clinically on top now. I can't decide that kind of works, kind of doesn't. I'm not going to worry too much about it without good reference about hair floating on water and stuff like that. Without going for a photographic look, which obviously this isn't. There's no way that it's a photographic look. I'm not going to worry too much about it, as long as it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. Be a funny place to have a thumb. There we are, sort of added a few highlighty ripply bits, and it blends in a bit better, I think. It's all about balancing what you think actually looks right. Sometimes in illustration, if you paint what actually is, it doesn't look right. It's odd. And I mean, that applies to painting generally as well, but it's like sometimes you can take a photograph of someone and it really doesn't look like them. Even though you know it is them, they were captured in that moment, it doesn't look like them, or it looks like they haven't got an arm because of the angle you're looking at it. And that's fine in a photo, but in a painting that you spend time over, that you're going to show someone, or that someone is going to look at and criticise, they will look at it and say, "Ooh, they haven't got an arm," because they don't understand that that's what's going on in the moment. You have to kind of take these oddities into account. There are certain conventions that in some quarters have to be adhered to. God, I'm waffling, I'm sorry. Trying to make her hair seem a bit shinier. It's not lovely. See, I'm adding a few ripple sort of effects now. Just giving up some rough sort of marks. I'll have to tidy them a bit, but making a few slightly sort of diamondy ripple shapes, sort of flattened diamonds, zigzaggies. Because this sort of water surface is supposed to look fairly slick and shiny, but it's also very dark, so I see him hopping about doing this. Not literally by my desk hopping about. That would make it very hard to control the stylus, and would get funny looks from my wife and my dog, and the cats would have left the room by then. Adding a few more highlighty bits there into the dark areas, because then it breaks that more, makes it seem a bit more alive. If you're going to paint water, I can't stress. I mean, over the 30 years odd, I've had to paint water and in various forms and sea battles and all sorts of things like this, and so I've got a sort of memory bank of some of the things I've painted, and I'm not saying it's an accurate memory bank, but it's something I'm feeding off as reference, obviously. So I must have seen this stuff to make it even remotely slightly. It's not convincing, but it's not totally unconvincing. But I can recommend strongly enough looking for a reference, or going and looking at the water is the best thing you could do. Preferably not during a tsunami, but there's loads of reference online, obviously. If you can go and see it live, all the better, because you get a much better feeling. No, I didn't like that. Did you get the impression I didn't like that? I was zagging when I should have been zigging. Softening it, making the marks, softening it. I don't want to draw too much attention down the bottom. I don't want you just going, "Oh, look at all the waves at the bottom." I want really, you need to be cease the focus. I mean, my idea really is to have a cup and saucer floating on the surface at the bottom, with a biscuit in the saucer, and then I can call the picture "Fancy a Dunk." A horrible habit in Britain of dunking biscuits in tea and coffee. I'm afraid I'm a dunker. Well, no, I'm not afraid at all. I'm proud to be a dunker. colour palette on this. Kind of yellow and sort of slight hints of turquoise going towards a dark blue. And that's where I'll leave it, I think. For now. I'm not going to get to the cup and saucer because that's irrelevant too. You don't need to see that. That'd be silly. So hopefully you picked up on the use of the soft palette knife to get fairly easy ripply effects, and you can use that on reflections generally and hint at things going along below the surface. You could do much better than this. Hopefully this will just be enough to get you started. So if you've got anything from this, great. If not, I'm sorry. And I will see you next time. Goodbye.